When my HOA morphed my storage facility into a communal dumping ground, I uncovered a corrupt scheme that had been fleecing us for years. What would you do if you discovered your neighbors were using your generosity as a cover for embezzlement? My wife, Sarah, nearly choked on her French vanilla coffee when I showed her the lawyer's letter. It felt heavy, like a lead weight, in my hands. Uncle Ernie had bequeathed me his storage facility on Maple Road, just outside our sleepy Sycamore Heights neighborhood. Sarah wiped a coffee stain from her chin, her brow furrowed in thought. Well, that's certainly unexpected. What are you planning to do with a storage facility? I sighed, gazing at the property photos. The place wasn't enormous, about 5,000 square feet, divided into 20 individual units, with a tiny office, all enclosed by a chain-link fence. It definitely needed a fresh coat of paint, and probably a new roof, but Uncle Ernie had, surprisingly, kept it in reasonably good shape. Sell it, I guess, I finally said. We could finally afford that kitchen renovation you've been dreaming about. Sarah tilted her head, considering. Or you could keep it. People are always desperate for storage. It might bring in a steady stream of income every month. Before I could respond, the doorbell chimed, an insistent ding-dong. I opened it to find Brenda standing on our porch, her impeccably styled, highlighted blonde bob utterly undisturbed by the gentle breeze. As HOA president, Brenda had a reputation for knowing everyone's business before they even realized they had any business. "Michael," she exclaimed, her smile wide, yet somehow not quite reaching her eyes. "I just heard about your inheritance. How absolutely thrilling. May I come in?" 10 minutes later, Brenda was perched at our kitchen table, delicately clutching a mug of chamomile tea. "The timing is simply perfect," she gushed. "The HOA has been struggling with where to store our seasonal decorations and maintenance equipment. The shed behind the clubhouse is practically collapsing." "That's unfortunate," I said cautiously, a prickle of unease starting at the back of my neck. "We've been diligently saving for a new storage solution," she continued, "but construction costs are just astronomical right now." She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Would you possibly consider allowing the HOA to use just a tiny section of your new property? It would be such a tremendous help to the community." I glanced at Sarah, who gave a small, almost imperceptible shrug. It seemed like a reasonable, even neighborly request. "I suppose I could set aside one unit for HOA use," I conceded, "just until I decide what to do with the place long-term." Brenda clapped her hands together, delighted. "Wonderful. Let's say a 3-month arrangement to start. I'll have Jim drop off a formal agreement tomorrow." After she left, Sarah raised a skeptical eyebrow. "That was awfully generous of you, Michael." "It's just 1 unit out of 20, I pointed out, "and it's temporary. What's the worst that could possibly happen?" Famous last words, I'd soon learn. 3 days later, I drove to the storage facility, intending to start clearing out Uncle Ernie's personal belongings. As I rounded the corner onto Maple Road, I slammed on the brakes so hard my seatbelt locked, my heart leaping into my throat. The entire front of my property was overflowing with cars and pickup trucks. People were frantically unloading furniture, mountains of boxes, and, unbelievably, what appeared to be an entire boat. I parked haphazardly on the street and pushed my way through the chaotic scene. Brenda stood in the center of the mayhem, clipboard in hand, directing traffic with the frantic energy of an air traffic controller at JFK. "Brenda, what in the world is going on here?" I shouted, barely audible over the din. She turned, beaming. "Oh, Michael, isn't this marvelous? I told everyone about our arrangement. The community is just overflowing with gratitude." Our arrangement was for 1 unit for HOA equipment. I said, my voice rising in disbelief as I watched Mr. Henderson struggle to maneuver a motorcycle into unit number 6. Well, yes, technically, Brenda admitted, but when I announced it at our emergency board meeting, everyone became so excited. We realized this could solve so many storage dilemmas for our residents. My jaw dropped. You can't just... The Johnson family is moving next month and needed temporary storage, she continued, completely steamrolling over my protest. And the Wilsons are renovating their basement. Oh, and the Hendersons needed somewhere for their summer vehicles. I spotted Brenda's husband, Jim, backing his truck toward the entrance. Inside the truck bed sat their entire patio furniture set and what looked suspiciously like a vintage pinball machine. Wait, this isn't what we agreed to, I said firmly, my voice shaking with rising anger. I need to ask everyone to stop. Brenda cut me off, lowering her voice and gripping my forearm with surprising strength. Michael, she hissed, the board unanimously voted to amend the bylaws yesterday. All common use facilities must be equally accessible to paying members. Since you've so generously designated this as a community resource, everyone has equal rights to it. She pressed a freshly printed document into my hand. The top read, in bold, red letters, Bylaw Amendment 47.3, Community Storage Access. This can't be legal, I sputtered, my mind reeling. I own this property. It's not even within HOA boundaries. Actually, Brenda said sweetly, a chilling glint in her eyes, the property line falls exactly 8 feet inside our jurisdiction. Jim meticulously checked the county maps. I looked around, a feeling of utter helplessness washing over me. Mrs. Patel was carefully arranging Christmas decorations in unit number 12. The high school wrestling coach was stacking weight equipment in number 15. Someone had already taped handwritten name labels on almost every single door. You need to stop this, right now, I insisted, my voice cracking. I never agreed to let the entire neighborhood use my property for free. Brenda's smile tightened, becoming a predatory grimace. Michael, you're making a scene. Think about how this looks. Do you really want to be the person who retracts a generous offer to your neighbors after they've already started moving in? That's not very community-minded. Several people had stopped their unloading to watch our increasingly heated exchange. One of them was Susan, our street's self-appointed decoration monitor, who had written me up twice for having my Christmas lights up 3 days past the acceptable removal date. Is there a problem, Michael? Susan asked, arms crossed over her designer workout wear, a smug expression on her face. I've already cleared out my garage to make room for my new home gym equipment. You can't back out now. I felt utterly trapped. 20 pairs of eyes stared at me, waiting, judging. This wasn't just Brenda anymore. These were people I saw at the mailbox, at block parties, people whose children played with my children. We can discuss this later, I said finally, forcing my voice to remain level. But this isn't what I agreed to, Brenda. She patted my shoulder condescendingly. We'll talk soon, Michael. Now, could you possibly help the Andersons with their grandfather's armoire? They're trying to fit it into unit number 8. It's quite a tight squeeze. Geez. I walked back to my car in a daze, the flimsy amendment papers clutched in my trembling hand. Somehow, my simple offer to let the HOA store a few boxes had spiraled into a complete, chaotic free-for-all, and according to this ridiculous document, I had absolutely no right to stop it. Driving home, my phone pinged with a new email. It was the Sycamore Heights community newsletter sent to all 245 households. The headline made my stomach plummet like a lead weight. Local homeowner generously donates storage facility to community. Grand opening today. My name was right there in the first paragraph. According to Brenda, I had generously offered unlimited storage access to all HOA members in a heartwarming display of neighborhood solidarity. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands shaking so violently I could barely hold the phone. This had gone from a simple misunderstanding to a full-blown, orchestrated disaster in less than 4 days. How was I supposed to fight the entire HOA? What rights did I even have? And why did I suddenly feel like I had been the target of an elaborately planned, meticulously executed takeover? Locks don't offer much protection when someone else possesses the keys. I discovered this ugly truth exactly 1 week after the storage facility takeover, when I arrived to find brand new gleaming padlocks on every single unit. Locks for which I, the rightful owner, possessed no keys. Sorry, Michael. Susan's voice made me jump. She was busily arranging plastic storage bins in what used to be my Uncle Ernie's office. We had to change the locks after someone reported suspicious activity last night. Suspicious activity? I could hear my voice rising, shrill and desperate, but I couldn't control it. This is my property. Who changed these locks? The HOA Security Committee, Susan replied, not even bothering to look up from her organizing. Don't worry, Brenda will make sure you get a master key, eventually. I took a deep, shaky breath, trying to regain some semblance of composure. Susan, this has gone way too far. I never donated this facility. I offered 1 unit for temporary HOA use. She finally turned to face me, hands planted firmly on her hips, her expression hardening. That's not what the community newsletter said, and it's certainly not what Brenda told everyone at the emergency meeting either. Her eyes narrowed. Are you calling our esteemed HOA president a liar? Before I could formulate a response, my phone rang. It was my boss, wondering, with increasing irritation, why I was absent from our crucial 9:30 meeting. I had to leave, promising myself I'd sort this mess out after work. But by 5 p.m., things had taken a decidedly worse turn. The facility parking lot was once again overflowing, with neighbors unloading even more items. Someone had audaciously hung a hand-painted sign that read Sycamore Heights Community Storage directly over my Uncle Ernie's old Ernie's Storage Solutions sign. I spotted Mrs. Patel struggling with a heavy box and rushed to assist her. Thank you, Michael, she said gratefully, her voice tinged with relief. It's my husband's bowling trophies. We're renovating our basement and needed somewhere safe for them. Mrs. Patel, I began, my voice low and urgent, I'm so sorry, but there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I never agreed to let everyone use this place for free. Her face fell. But the newsletter said, I know what it said, I interrupted gently, but it's simply not true. Brenda never asked me about opening the entire facility to everyone. Mrs. Patel looked confused, her brow furrowed. But she showed us the paperwork. Your signature was on it. My blood ran cold. My signature? Can you describe this paperwork? It had the HOA logo at the top, she said, shifting uncomfortably. Something about property donation for community use. It said you were honored to continue your uncle's legacy of community service. Uncle Ernie had been a famously grumpy loner who once chased neighborhood kids off his lawn with a garden hose. Community service wasn't exactly his forte. I thanked Mrs. Patel and drove straight to Brenda's house, fury building with every mile. This was beyond a misunderstanding. This was outright fraud. Her pristine white colonial came into view, its perfectly trimmed hedges and color-coordinated flower beds screaming, I follow the rules I create. Brenda wasn't home, but her husband Jim was mowing their already immaculate lawn. Michael, he said, killing the engine, what brings you by? Your wife forged my signature on an HOA document, I said, dispensing with any pretense of small talk. I need to speak with her immediately. Jim's friendly smile vanished, replaced by a cold, hard stare. That's a very serious accusation, Michael. It's also illegal, Louise, I retorted. Where is she? Board meeting, at the clubhouse. His voice had turned icy. But I'd be very careful throwing around words like illegal if I were you. Is that a threat, Jim? He restarted his lawnmower, the roar drowning out any possible response. Just friendly advice between neighbors. The clubhouse was a 10-minute drive away. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. What was happening? How had a simple misunderstanding escalated into document forgery and veiled threats? And why did they want my storage facility so desperately? I pulled into the clubhouse parking lot just as the meeting was ending. Board members streamed out, including Roger, who gave me a sympathetic, almost pitying nod. Brenda was last, locking the door behind her. Michael, what a nice surprise, she said, her smile remaining fixed, plastered onto her face. We need to talk about the fraudulent document you've been showing people, I said quietly, my voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. The one with my forged signature. Fraudulent? I don't know what you mean, she said, trying to step around me. I blocked her path. Mrs. Patel told me everything. You showed her paperwork claiming I donated the storage facility. You faked my signature. For a split second, her carefully constructed mask slipped. Something cold, calculating, and utterly ruthless flashed in her eyes before the saccharine smile returned. There seems to be a misunderstanding, she said smoothly. I simply showed everyone our amended bylaws, which you're well aware of, and the agreement you signed when you so generously offered the space to the community. I never signed anything. Well, that's not how I remember it, she said, checking her watch pointedly. I'm already late for dinner. We can discuss this at the next board meeting. Feel free to submit your concerns in writing for the agenda. As she walked away, Roger approached me cautiously. Everything okay, Michael? No, I admitted, my voice raw. They've basically stolen my property and are now claiming I donated it willingly. Roger glanced around to make sure no one was listening. You wouldn't be the first. The Smiths lost their RV parking pad the same way last year. They had county approval, but somehow the HOA claimed it violated some buried clause in the CC&Rs. How do they get away with this, I asked, a sense of despair creeping in. People don't want to fight, he shrugged. It's expensive, messy, and Brenda makes sure those who resist face consequences. What kind of consequences? Roger winced. The Smiths got violation notices every single day for 6 weeks. Mailbox height, improper grass length, unauthorized wind chimes. Each notice came with a hefty fine. They finally gave up. A cold feeling spread through my chest. She can't just take my property. Maybe not legally, Roger agreed, but she has the HOA's legal fund at her disposal while you'd be paying out of pocket. Most people decide it's simply not worth the battle. I drove home in a daze, trying to make sense of the tangled web of deceit and manipulation. The storage facility wasn't particularly valuable. It needed repairs and updates, but it was mine. Uncle Ernie had left it to me, not to Brenda and her power-hungry HOA board. When I pulled into my driveway, I noticed something odd. My garbage cans were missing from their usual spot beside the garage. I found them dragged to the front of my lawn, tipped over, with trash spilling out in a disgusting mess. Taped to my front door was a bright orange violation notice. Improper garbage receptacle storage, $50 fine. Repeat violations, subject to increased penalties. I checked my watch. It was barely past 7 p.m. Trash pickup wasn't until tomorrow morning. This wasn't a mistake. This was a message. Inside, Sarah was on the phone, her face pale with worry. When she hung up, she looked at me, her eyes wide with fear. That was Amanda from across the street, she said. We should check our mailbox. I went back outside and opened our mailbox to find a stack of official-looking envelopes from the HOA. 6 separate violation notices, each citing a different, utterly ridiculous infraction. Unapproved garden border stones, excessive bird feeders, non-compliant porch lighting, improper mailbox height, unauthorized window screens, and, most infuriatingly of all, disruptive lawn ornaments. For the small ceramic turtle our daughter had made in art class. Total fines, $530, all dated today. Sarah appeared beside me, reading over my shoulder, her breath catching in her throat. This can't be a coincidence. It's not, I said grimly, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. It's Brenda showing us what happens to people who don't fall in line. What are we going to do? Melissa asked, her voice barely a whisper, the stack of violation notices trembling in her hands. I stared at the stump of our beloved oak tree, still visible through the living room window, a stark reminder of Brenda's ruthlessness. Anger, hot and sharp, surged through me. They thought they could bully me into submission with fake fines and intimidation tactics. They thought I'd give up, like the Smiths, and who knows how many others before me. They were dead wrong. First, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, we're going to find out exactly why they want that storage facility so badly. Then, I added, a grim smile spreading across my face, we're going to fight back. How? Melissa looked skeptical, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and doubt. They control everything. Not everything, I countered. Uncle Ernie was a meticulous record keeper, almost to the point of obsession. And I bet those records will tell us a lot about where my property lines really fall. Little did I know that Uncle Ernie's dusty, forgotten property maps would reveal a secret, a carefully concealed truth that would turn the entire Sycamore Heights power structure upside down. Your property doesn't belong to you anymore. Susan's smug words echoed in my head as I slammed my car door shut, the sound reverberating through the nearly empty parking lot of the county clerk's office. Nobody takes what's mine. Nobody. I marched into the office, clutching my deed papers like a lifeline. The clerk, a gray-haired woman named Gloria with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up from her computer. Someone stole my storage building, I blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. Several people in the waiting area turned to stare. Gloria raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Stole a building? That's a new one. Sit down, hun, and start from the very beginning. For the next hour, I spread papers across her desk. Uncle Ernie's will, the property deed, the HOA's ludicrous amendment, their self-congratulatory newsletter announcing my supposed donation. Gloria listened patiently, her expression growing increasingly incredulous. Honey, she said finally, tapping my deed with a long, red-painted fingernail, they can't just take your property with some made-up HOA rule change. That's like me saying, I made a rule that your car is now my car. Doesn't work that way. Gloria pulled up detailed property maps on her computer screen. Look here, she said, tracing a bright red line with her finger. Your storage facility sits on this parcel, and the HOA boundary line runs right here. Well, would you look at that? Your building isn't even inside their territory. It's outside by nearly 12 feet. My jaw dropped. They have no authority over it at all? None whatsoever, Gloria confirmed, a triumphant glint in her eyes. She printed out the boundary map for me. And here's something else that might interest you. The county sent violation notices to your HOA 3 times last year about improper equipment storage. They were required to find a proper storage solution or face some pretty hefty fines. I felt my face grow hot with a mixture of anger and vindication. When was the deadline? Let me check. Gloria typed furiously on her keyboard. Next Tuesday. They're cutting it awfully close, aren't they? Armed with this explosive information, I immediately visited my friend, Miguel, a sharp, no-nonsense real estate attorney. He reviewed everything, his brow furrowed in concentration, then drafted an official cease and desist letter, his pen scratching furiously across the legal pad. "This should do it," Miguel said, handing me the letter with a confident smirk. "And if they ignore it, which they very well might, we can file for a temporary restraining order." I decided to deliver my message in person at the next HOA meeting. I arrived early, choosing a seat in the back, and watched as neighbors filtered in. Some nodded hello, others whispered amongst themselves when they saw me. Brenda, looking particularly smug, tapped her gavel, calling the meeting to order. "First item on the agenda," she announced, her voice dripping with self-satisfaction, "the new community storage facility signage. We have several lovely options to consider." "Excuse me," I interrupted, standing up, my voice clear and strong. "I'd like to discuss that facility." Brenda's smile froze, becoming a strained grimace. "Michael, how nice of you to join us. We were just discussing the sign options for the community storage area." "Funny timing," I replied, walking to the front of the room, my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. "I've spent this past week meticulously researching property law." A hush fell over the room. Jim, sitting in the front row, nervously pulled at his collar. "Did you know," I continued, placing the enlarged boundary map on the table, "that my storage building sits outside HOA boundaries by exactly 12 feet? I had it professionally surveyed yesterday." Susan jumped to her feet, her face contorted with outrage. "That's impossible. We checked." "Did you?" I turned to her, my voice laced with sarcasm. "Or did you just assume? Because county records are very, very clear." I placed another document on the table. "And here's something else that's rather interesting. The HOA has been cited 3 times for improper equipment storage. You're facing a $10,000 fine unless you find a solution by next Tuesday." Brenda's carefully constructed smile vanished completely. We've been completely transparent about our storage needs," she stammered, her voice losing its usual confidence. "Really?" I challenged, holding up a printout of an email I'd obtained through a public records request. "Then perhaps you can explain this. This is a quote for $48,000 to build a new storage facility, dated exactly 1 day before you showed up at my doorstep with your so-called community benefit proposal." The room erupted. Neighbors turned to each other, their voices rising in a cacophony of anger and disbelief. "You were going to steal my property to avoid paying a fine?" I shouted, my voice trembling with fury. "You changed the HOA rules specifically to take what was rightfully mine." Susan stood up, pointing a shaking finger at me. "This is ridiculous. We were doing you a favor by maintaining that ugly, dilapidated building. You should be thanking us." "Thanking you?" I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "For trespassing? For stealing? For lying to everyone here?" Brenda banged her gavel repeatedly, her face turning a mottled red. "Order, order, we have a binding agreement." "No, we don't," I retorted, sliding Miguel's cease and desist letter across the table. "My attorney strongly disagrees. You have until this weekend to remove all of your belongings." An older couple in the corner, the Millers, started clapping, hesitantly at first, then with increasing enthusiasm. Another neighbor joined in. Soon, nearly half the room was applauding, a wave of defiance washing over the stunned silence. Brenda's face had turned a frightening shade of purple. "This meeting is adjourned," she shouted over the rising noise. As people filed out, several neighbors patted my shoulder, their faces alight with a mixture of gratitude and relief. "Good for you, Michael," one whispered. Walking to my car, I spotted Roger, my neighbor from across the street. "That was quite a show," he said, falling into step beside me. "But be careful, Michael. Brenda doesn't lose gracefully. What could she possibly do now? I asked, a sense of weary exhaustion settling over me. Roger looked at me, his expression serious. I've lived here for 10 years, Michael. I've seen things. When the Johnsons questioned the exorbitant pool renovation budget, their yard was suddenly full of code violations. When the Garcia family complained about the unreasonable noise rules, their approved home addition was mysteriously revoked. A chill ran down my spine. You think she'd retaliate? I know she would, Roger said grimly. He glanced back at the community center. And Jim works for the city planning department. They have connections, Michael. I thought about my beautiful yard, my recently installed fence, my home business that operated under a special HOA exemption. What should I do? Roger smiled slightly, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I didn't say give up, Michael. I said be careful, and maybe start documenting everything about your property. Right now. Take pictures, measurements, everything. Because I guarantee you, they're already plotting their next move. I drove home, my mind racing, wondering what fresh hell would await me. I'd won this battle, but the war was far from over. And from the look in Brenda's eyes as I'd left, she wasn't just angry, she was out for blood. What would she target first? My house, my yard, or something I hadn't even considered? The ear-splitting roar of a chainsaw ripped me from sleep at precisely 6:17 a.m. I jumped out of bed and ran to the window, my heart hammering against my ribs. 3 men in bright yellow vests were in my front yard, brutally cutting down my prized oak tree. The majestic tree that had stood sentinel over our home for decades. I rushed outside, still in my pajamas, my bare feet stinging on the cold pavement. Stop! What are you doing to my tree? The workers paused, their chainsaws falling silent. One man, wearing a hard hat and holding a clipboard, approached me. HOA emergency removal order, sir, he said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. This tree has been marked as hazardous. Hazardous? I sputtered, incredulous. That tree is perfectly healthy. I just had it inspected by a certified arborist last spring. He handed me a piece of paper. Not according to this inspection report, sir. Says there's extensive root damage threatening the sidewalk and the power lines. The report was dated yesterday and signed by Brenda as HOA president. My hands shook with a rage so intense I thought I might explode. This is my property. You can't just— Sir, we have the proper authorization, he interrupted, his tone dismissive. You can take it up with your HOA, but we have a job to do. I called Sarah at work, my voice cracking with emotion. They're cutting down our oak tree, I sobbed. The one we hung the kids' swing on, the one we've had family photos taken under for years. What? Why would they do that? Revenge, I said, watching helplessly as another massive branch crashed to the ground, the sound echoing the shattering of my sense of security. Pure, unadulterated revenge. Gampus. I drove straight to Brenda's house, still wearing my slippers, my pajamas flapping in the wind. She answered the door in her tennis clothes, a racket in one hand, a smug, self-satisfied expression on her face. Michael, what a surprise, there, she said, her voice dripping with false concern. I'm just heading out for my morning game. You know exactly why I'm here, I said, my voice tight with controlled fury. My tree, the one my children grew up climbing. She tilted her head, feigning sympathy. Oh, that terrible situation. But the inspection found serious safety issues, Michael. We can't risk having a tree fall and injure someone. It's for the good of the community. It was perfectly fine until I exposed your storage scam. Brenda's smile hardened, becoming a chilling mask of malice. Be careful with your accusations, Michael. They could be considered defamation. She checked her watch, a theatrical gesture. I'm late for tennis. By the way, I noticed your fence yesterday. It appears to be 6 inches taller than regulation height. Expect a notice. Before I could respond, she brushed past me, heading towards her car, leaving me standing on her doorstep, speechless with rage and frustration. By the time I returned home, my beautiful, majestic oak was nothing but a gaping stump. Sarah stood in the yard, tears streaming down her face, her hands clutching her chest. 30 years old, she whispered, her voice choked with grief. We've had family photos taken under that tree every year since we moved in. The next morning, a bright orange violation notice appeared on our door. Fence height violation, $150, fine. The day after that, unapproved mailbox design, $100 fine. Then, excessive bird feeders, $75 fine. Unauthorized garden stones, $50 fine. Improper house numbers, $80 fine. They were trying to break us, not just financially, but emotionally, systematically dismantling our lives piece by piece. I wasn't the only target. Roger received 6 violations in 3 days after he dared to question Brenda at the mailboxes. The elderly Smiths, who had bravely applauded me at the meeting, suddenly faced complaints about their rose garden, which had won neighborhood awards for 8 years running. We need to fight back, together, I told Sarah, my voice filled with a newfound determination. This isn't just about our storage building anymore, it's about all of us. I invited Roger and the Smiths over for dinner. Harold Smith, a retired contract lawyer with thick glasses and perpetually worn suspenders, brought a bulging folder, overflowing with documents. They picked the wrong people to bully, Mrs. Smith declared, serving herself a generous portion of salad. Harold was a contract lawyer for 40 years. He knows how to sniff out corruption. Harold nodded, his expression grim. This goes far beyond normal HOA nonsense. I've been digging through their financial records, their public documents, though they don't exactly advertise that fact. He spread papers across our dining room table. Look here. Last year, the HOA collected $85,000 specifically for playground renovation. The playground that's still broken and falling apart? Sarah asked, her voice laced with disbelief. Exactly, and Harold confirmed. And see this company that received a $40,000 deposit? He pointed to a suspiciously vague invoice. Try our construction. Guess who owns it? Jim's brother-in-law, Roger answered, his voice tight with anger. I checked state business registrations. My mouth fell open. They're stealing from us. Harold nodded grimly. For years, inflated landscaping contracts, fake consulting fees, mysterious administrative expenses. They've been treating the HOA account like their personal piggy bank. Mrs. Smith pointed to another document. And anyone who dares to ask questions gets systematically pushed out. Remember the Hendersons? Their yard was suddenly full of violations after Jeff Henderson requested a financial audit. They moved away rather than fight. They tried the same trick with your storage building, Roger added, his gaze meeting mine. They needed it to fix their storage violation problem, but they didn't want to spend HOA money on a proper solution. So they tried to take yours. I felt sick to my stomach, looking at the overwhelming evidence. This wasn't just petty overreach. This was actual fraud. Criminal fraud. Yes, Harold agreed, his voice low and serious, and I have a plan to expose everything. But it's risky. Roger leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. I think we should pretend to give in. What? Sarah and I exclaimed in unison, our voices filled with shock and disbelief. I mean, Roger clarified, act like they've beaten you down. Tell Brenda you've reconsidered her offer to make the storage facility a community resource. But secretly, we set a trap. Harold nodded enthusiastically. We need irrefutable evidence of them abusing their positions. If we can document clear, undeniable violations, we can take this to the county prosecutor. and I know exactly how to catch them. Roger added, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, I have a friend who installs high-end security systems, including hidden cameras with night vision capabilities. As they outlined their audacious plan, my stomach twisted with a mixture of excitement and fear. This wasn't just about my property anymore. It was about exposing years of deeply entrenched corruption that had hurt dozens, possibly hundreds, of families. If we fail, Sarah said quietly, her voice trembling, they'll make our lives utterly impossible. We might have to move. And if we do nothing, Mrs. Smith countered, her voice firm and resolute, they'll keep stealing from everyone and bullying anyone who dares to speak up. I looked at the gaping stump of my oak tree, visible through the window, a constant, painful reminder of Brenda's cruelty and the community's vulnerability. The tree my daughter had climbed as a child, the tree that had shaded our yard for 30 long summers, the tree that had been a silent witness to countless family memories. I'm in, I said, surprising even myself with how steady my voice sounded. But we need to be smart. Brenda and Jim have connections all over town. Then we need better connections, Roger said, a mysterious smile playing on his lips. My cousin works for the local newspaper. How do you feel about going public with what we know so far? The group fell silent, considering the profound implications. Going public would mean crossing a point of no return. Were we really ready to start a full-blown neighborhood war? Or was it finally time for someone, for all of us, to stand up to the corruption that had poisoned our community for years? The silence stretched, thick with unspoken anxieties and a growing sense of collective resolve. They took the bait, I whispered to Roger, my voice barely audible above the hum of the hidden camera's recording equipment. We watched, mesmerized, as Brenda and Jim, their faces pale and drawn in the ghostly glow of the night vision monitors, hurried into my storage facility with boxes clearly labeled Financial Records, Confidential, at precisely 11:43 p.m. The hidden cameras, strategically placed throughout the building thanks to Roger's friend, captured every furtive movement, every hushed whisper, every nervous glance. Most importantly, they captured what they were desperately trying to hide. 3 days earlier, I had shocked everyone, including Sarah, by seemingly capitulating. I've decided to accept the HOA's position and allow full community access to my storage facility, I announced in an email blasted to all residents. The collective gasp from the neighborhood was almost audible. Sarah thought I'd completely lost my mind. Trust me, I told her, showing her the tiny, almost invisible cameras we'd painstakingly hidden throughout the building. This isn't surrender. It's a carefully orchestrated trap. Harold, with his decades of legal experience, had uncovered something truly explosive. The HOA was under active investigation by the county for missing funds from the playground renovation project, funds that had mysteriously vanished into thin air. What Brenda and Jim didn't know was that we'd anonymously tipped off the investigators ourselves after finding irrefutable proof of their embezzlement buried deep within the HOA's meticulously obfuscated meeting minutes. Brenda and Jim will panic when they hear about the investigation, Roger predicted, his voice tight with anticipation. They'll need to hide or destroy the incriminating evidence, fast. He was absolutely right. My generous donation of the storage facility provided them with the perfect, seemingly secure location to stash the damning documents, a place where they believed nobody would ever think to look. The next morning, I found Susan busily rearranging the space, claiming she was optimizing for efficiency. Her usual smugness was tinged with a nervous energy that betrayed her anxiety. Feel free to move things around, I said cheerfully, struggling to keep a straight face. I trust the HOA completely now. Her suspicious look was priceless. What changed your mind, Michael? Let's just say, I've seen the light, I replied, my voice dripping with irony, about community responsibility. I couldn't resist adding, by the way, there's a special HOA meeting tomorrow night. Will you be there? What Susan didn't know was that we had called the meeting, not Brenda. We'd invited every single homeowner in Sycamore Heights with a simple, provocative message. Your HOA fees are being raised again. Come find out why. The community center buzzed with a palpable sense of nervous anticipation when I arrived. Many neighbors who never attended meetings had shown up, drawn by the promise of answers, their faces etched with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Brenda looked rattled by the unusually large crowd, but she plastered on her signature, plastic smile, desperately trying to maintain an air of control. Before we begin official business, she announced, her voice tight and strained, I'd like to thank Michael for his incredibly generous donation of the storage facility to our community. People clapped politely, a smattering of applause that lacked any real enthusiasm. I caught Roger's eye, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. It was time. Actually, I said, standing up, my voice resonating through the hushed room, I'd like to explain exactly what I've donated. We really need to stick to the agenda, Michael. Brenda interjected sharply, her carefully constructed facade beginning to crack. Harold spoke up from the back, his voice calm but firm. I believe everyone here would be very interested to hear this, especially before voting on the proposed 15% fee increase. The room fell utterly silent. People who had been checking their phones, seemingly indifferent, suddenly looked up, their attention riveted on me. I haven't donated my facility to the HOA, I said clearly, my voice echoing through the room. I've donated temporary access to something much more valuable, the truth about where your hard-earned money has been going for the past 7 years. Roger wheeled in a projector and laptop, while Mrs. Smith, moving with surprising agility for her age, began handing out thick folders to every stunned homeowner. Inside these packets, I continued, my voice gaining strength, you'll find copies of HOA financial records, meticulously documented, showing mysterious consulting fees paid to companies owned by board members, contracts with massively inflated prices awarded to Jim's brother-in-law, and nearly $50,000 in missing playground renovation funds, money that was supposed to benefit our children. Jim jumped to his feet, his face contorted with rage. This is slander. You can't prove any of this. Actually, we can, I replied calmly, nodding to Roger, who started the video. The screen flickered to life, displaying crystal-clear night vision footage of Jim and Brenda entering my storage facility the previous night, their faces illuminated by the eerie green glow. The audio, crisp and clear, captured their hushed, panicked conversation. If they find these invoices, we're finished. Jim's voice, strained with fear, rang out through the room. Susan gasped loudly, her hand flying to her mouth. On screen, Brenda was saying, her voice cold and calculating, we'll blame everything on the previous board, if we have to. No one can prove anything if these papers disappear. But that's not all, I continued, as the damning video played, revealing the full extent of their treachery. Yesterday, we shared this irrefutable evidence with County Prosecutor Jenkins, who has officially opened a formal criminal investigation. The room exploded. Some people shouted angry questions. Others demanded Brenda and Jim's immediate resignation. Through the chaos, I watched the color drain from Susan's face as she realized she'd been an unwitting pawn in their elaborate, long-running scheme. You tricked us, she said, when she finally reached me, her voice barely audible above the din. No, Susan, I replied, my voice filled with a mixture of sadness and pity. Brenda and Jim tricked all of us, for years. Across the room, Brenda and Jim were backing towards the exit, their faces ashen, their carefully constructed world crumbling around them. Mrs. Smith, moving with a speed that belied her age, strategically blocked their escape route. "The police are outside," she informed them, her voice grim and resolute. "They'd like to ask you a few questions about those missing funds." As officers entered the room, their expressions somber, I felt no sense of triumph, only a profound sadness for our fractured, betrayed community and a fierce determination to rebuild it, brick by brick, on a foundation of honesty and transparency. The stunned faces of my neighbors reflected a terrible, unsettling question. If we couldn't trust the people we elected to look after our community, who could we trust? "You won't believe what I just saw," my neighbor Jeff burst through my front door without even knocking, his eyes wide with disbelief. "The police are at Brenda and Jim's house. They're loading boxes of documents into their cars." After weeks of agonizing waiting, the investigation was finally, visibly moving forward. The scandal ripped through our quiet, once peaceful community like a devastating tornado. Some neighbors, blinded by loyalty or fear, took sides immediately, but most were simply shocked into stunned silence. The day after the explosive meeting, people gathered in small, anxious clusters at mailboxes and driveways, whispering about stolen playground funds, secret kickbacks, and years of carefully concealed deception. My phone rang constantly, with neighbors asking questions I couldn't answer, their voices filled with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and a desperate need for reassurance. "What happens now?" became everyone's burning unanswered question. I found Susan sitting alone on a bench near the duck pond, staring blankly at the water, her usual perfectly coiffed hair disheveled, her designer workout clothes rumpled and stained. When she saw me, she flinched, as if expecting another accusation. Did you know?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, her eyes not meeting mine. "That I was part of their scheme too?" "I don't think so," I replied honestly. "I think you were just doing what Brenda told you to do. I think you genuinely believed you were protecting our community." Tears spilled down her cheeks, leaving streaks in her carefully applied makeup. "She made me feel important," she confessed, her voice choked with emotion, like I was safeguarding our community from people who didn't care about the rules, people who were different. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. "I was so mean to you, Michael. About your tree, about everything." The confession surprised me. Susan, the queen of passive-aggressive rule enforcement, admitting she was wrong? Perhaps there was hope for Sycamore Heights after all. A week later, flyers appeared on every door, crisp and clean, announcing an emergency community meeting, rebuilding our neighborhood. Roger, stepping up with unexpected leadership, had reserved the public library meeting room, since the usual HOA venue now felt tainted, poisoned by years of deceit. "We have two choices," Harold told the packed room, his voice resonating with authority. "We can wallow in anger and resentment about what happened, or we can use this as an opportunity to build something better, something stronger, something more transparent." Most of the board members had resigned in shame, their reputations irrevocably tarnished. Those who remained looked shell-shocked, utterly defeated. Nobody wanted to lead after what had happened. The community was rudderless, adrift in a sea of uncertainty. "I nominate Mrs. Smith for interim president," I said, standing up, my voice clear and strong. The room fell silent, stunned by the unexpected suggestion. "She's lived here longer than anyone," I continued. "Her husband was a brilliant lawyer, and she was the first person to question the suspicious financial records." To my surprise, Susan seconded the nomination, her voice surprisingly firm. "She's honest. she said simply, and that's exactly what we need right now. Mrs. Smith accepted the nomination with a stern, no-nonsense look that reminded me of my formidable third-grade teacher. First order of business, she announced, her voice echoing through the room. Every single financial record, down to the last penny, will be posted online for everyone to see. Complete transparency. People applauded, hesitantly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, a sense of relief washing over the room. Second, she continued, her voice unwavering, no more ridiculous petty rules about bird feeders and garden stones. Rules should protect property values, not punish creativity or individuality. The applause grew louder, more confident, fueled by a renewed sense of hope. And third, she said, fixing me with a determined stare, we need a headquarters for this new beginning. A physical space where we can come together, rebuild trust, and foster a true sense of community. Michael, what are you planning to do with your storage facility? All eyes turned to me. This was my chance to reclaim my property completely, to be done with the entire, exhausting mess, to finally put this nightmare behind me. Instead, I heard myself say, my voice surprising even me with its conviction, I'm creating a real community space, not owned by the HOA, but available to everyone through a newly established non-profit organization. Shocked whispers rippled through the crowd. Why would you do that? Someone called out, their voice filled with disbelief. After everything that happened? Because Brenda and Jim don't get to ruin the idea of community for all of us, I answered, my voice strong and clear. They stole money. They abused their power. They betrayed our trust, but they can't take away our neighborhood unless we let them. 2 months later, I stood back, amazed and humbled, as volunteers, neighbors who had once been divided by suspicion and animosity, transformed my old, dilapidated warehouse into something truly extraordinary. Sarah, tapping into her hidden design talents, had created a beautiful, functional layout with a tool-lending library, a bright, airy meeting space, and even a small, cozy coffee corner. I want to help, she said simply, her voice devoid of its usual condescension. I need to make things right. We worked side by side, painting the meeting room a cheerful, welcoming yellow. When we finished, she said quietly, her voice filled with a mixture of regret and hope. I'm selling my house, Michael. Too many bad memories here. Where will you go? I asked, genuinely curious. The day we officially opened the Pine Hollow Community Center, nearly 100 neighbors showed up, their faces filled with a mixture of curiosity, hope, and a cautious optimism. Children played on the newly cleared grounds, their laughter echoing through the air. Adults chatted, awkwardly at first, then with growing warmth and familiarity. Tentative connections being forged, old wounds slowly beginning to heal. Sarah squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with pride and a touch of disbelief. Funny how things turn out, isn't it? She said softly. You inherited a dusty old storage building and ended up with something so much bigger. A real community. A lesson in unintended donations, I suppose. I agreed, a smile spreading across my face. That evening, I checked my mail and found a plain white envelope with no return address. Inside was a cashier's check for $12,000 and a single, handwritten note. For the tree, I'm sorry, Jim. The next day, I took the check to the local nursery and bought 20 young oak saplings, their leaves a vibrant, hopeful green. The following weekend, neighbors gathered, armed with shovels, wheelbarrows, and watering cans. We planted the trees in every spot where Brenda had ordered hazardous removals over the years, transforming scars into symbols of renewal. As we worked, I noticed something truly remarkable. People who hadn't spoken in years, who had been divided by petty squabbles and manufactured grievances, were laughing together, sharing stories, working side by side. Children ran between the planting sites, carrying watering cans far too big for them, their faces beaming with excitement. Even Mrs. Smith, perched on a lawn chair, clipboard in hand, directing operations with her usual efficiency, allowed a small, genuine smile to grace her lips. Standing back to admire our work, dirt under my fingernails, sweat on my brow, a sense of profound satisfaction washed over me. I felt someone beside me and turned to see Jeff, his expression thoughtful. "You know what amazes me, Michael?" he said, his voice filled with a quiet wonder. "How one person, standing up for what's right, can fix what seemed broken beyond repair." I shook my head. "Not one person, Jeff. All of us, together." I looked around at my transformed neighborhood. Not perfect, certainly. Still healing, still fragile in many ways, but undeniably alive with a newfound sense of purpose and possibility. And I realized that sometimes the most powerful thing you can donate isn't a building, or money, or even time. It's the courage to say, enough, when something is wrong, the willingness to stand up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult, even when it's unpopular, even when it means facing down the bullies and the liars. Would our community have found its voice, its collective strength, if the HOA hadn't pushed too far, if they hadn't tried to steal my storage facility? I'll never know for sure. But I'm grateful every single day that they did. This story highlights the crucial importance of community vigilance and the power of collective action. It demonstrates that even seemingly small acts of corruption left unchecked can erode trust and damage the fabric of a community. It also shows that one person, with courage and the support of others, can make a difference, even against seemingly insurmountable odds. Don't be afraid to speak up, to question authority, and to stand up for what you believe is right. Your voice matters. What are your thoughts on this story? Have you ever experienced a similar situation with an HOA or another organization? Share your experiences and insights in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that explore the complexities of human relationships and the power of community.